Welcome to the Roots of Fear, where we unearth the darkest tales from America's forgotten past. Tonight, we delve into a chilling story from the quiet hills of Vermont. The year is 1869, and what lies beneath the floorboards of the Grady family barn will haunt your dreams for years to come. The small town of Blackwood Hollow doesn't appear on any modern maps of Vermont, perhaps for good reason. In the autumn of 1869, this once thriving community became the setting for one of the most disturbing discoveries in New England's history. But before we uncover what was hidden beneath those weathered barn floorboards, we must first understand the Grady family themselves. Jeremiah Grady arrived in Vermont in the spring of 1853. A man of considerable means and mysterious background. Some said he had made his fortune in shipping along the eastern seaboard. Others whispered of darker ventures in the Caribbean. What is known is that he purchased the largest property in Blackwood Hollow, 500 acres of rolling farmland with views of the Green Mountains, and set about building a life that from the outside appeared idyllic. Within a year, Jeremiah had constructed an impressive farmhouse of white clapboard with black shutters, a structure that seemed to announce his prosperity to the modest community. But it was the barn that drew attention from those who visited the property. Unusually large and built with a curious attention to detail. The structure featured thick walls and small high windows that let in minimal light. Local carpenters who assisted with its construction noted the peculiar design, most notably the foundation, which was dug far deeper than necessary for a typical barn. Mr. Grady had specific requirements, recalled Thomas Whitfield, one of the builders, in a letter to his cousin. The floor was to be laid with 3 layers of thick oak planks, each running in different directions and sealed with pitch between each layer. When I inquired as to the purpose of such an unusual floor, he merely stated that the cold Vermont winters required special considerations to keep his livestock warm. By 1855, Jeremiah had taken a wife, Constance Porter, the youngest daughter of a businessman from Burlington. Constance was described as a beautiful woman with porcelain skin and dark hair that she wore pulled severely back from her face. She was half Jeremiah's age and, according to town gossip, had been sent to marry him after some unspecified scandal had made her unmarriageable in higher society. The couple quickly had 2 children of their own, Abigail in 1856 and Thomas in 1858. From all accounts, they were a quiet family who kept to themselves, attending church services in town, but rarely participating in community events. Jeremiah employed a modest staff to help maintain the property, including a housekeeper, a groundskeeper, and several farmhands who tended to the crops and livestock. What made the Gradys unusual, however, was their apparent charitable inclination toward orphan children. Beginning in 1860, the family began taking in orphans from as far away as Boston and New York. According to records kept by the local church, Reverend Samuel Carter noted that the Gradys had opened their home to 3 orphan children that summer, 2 boys and a girl, all under the age of 10. The Christian charity shown by the Grady family is most commendable, the Reverend wrote in the parish newsletter. Mr. Grady has expressed his belief that children are a blessing from the Lord, and those without families deserve the comfort and security of a good home. Over the next several years, more children arrived at the Grady farm. By 1863, in the midst of the Civil War, locals estimated that at least 15 children were living on the property. Jeremiah explained that many were the offspring of soldiers who had fallen in battle, and it was his patriotic duty to provide for them. The community, while finding the situation unusual, generally applauded the family's generosity. Martha Wilson, who served as the town school teacher from 1862 to 1867, had this to say: "The Grady children, as we called them, rarely attended school with any regularity. When questioned, Mr. Grady explained that he provided education at home, believing the standard curriculum insufficient. Few who did attend were quiet, well-mannered, and reluctant to speak of their life at the farm. They appeared healthy, if somewhat thin, and were always withdrawn from classes at the first sign of illness. It's important to note that during this period, formal adoption procedures were virtually non-existent, and the taking in of orphans was often an informal arrangement, particularly in rural areas. There were no agencies overseeing such situations, and a man of Jeremiah's standing would have faced few questions about his charitable endeavors. By 1865, as the Civil War drew to a close, something changed at the Grady farm. The family became increasingly reclusive. Jeremiah was rarely seen in town, sending farm hands to conduct business on his behalf. Constance, once a regular at Sunday services, stopped attending church altogether. The Grady children, both biological and adopted, vanished from public view. When questioned, Jeremiah cited concerns about a mysterious illness. "My wife fears the children may contract something dreadful in town," he told the general store owner, William Hayes. "We find it best to keep them close to home until the danger passes." This explanation satisfied most of the town's people, who were accustomed to periodic outbreaks of disease and the isolation that often followed. What few noticed, however, was that while no children were seen leaving the Grady property, new faces continued to arrive. Always under cover of night. Always in a covered wagon driven by Jeremiah himself. Then came the spring of 1868 when the Grady farm experienced a terrible tragedy. A fire broke out in the family's main house, supposedly started by a knocked-over lantern. By the time neighbors noticed the flames and arrived to help, the structure was engulfed. Jeremiah, Constance, and their 2 biological children escaped unharmed. Of the orphans, there was no sign. They were safely relocated to the barn when the fire began. Jeremiah explained to those who asked, "We had noticed a weakness in the chimney days earlier and moved the children as a precaution. The Lord guided our actions." The house was rebuilt by autumn, a near identical structure rising from the ashes of the old, but something had shifted in Jeremiah Grady. Those who encountered him described a man changed. His once robust frame had thinned. His hair had gone completely gray, and his eyes held a haunted quality that made people uncomfortable. Constance was rarely seen at all following the fire. Rumors circulated that the event had affected her nerves, leaving her bedridden and unstable. The few who glimpsed her reported that she had taken to wearing only white and would stare silently out of the upstairs windows for hours at a time. As for the orphans, they seemed to have vanished entirely. When Reverend Carter inquired about their welfare, Jeremiah explained that they had been sent to live with relatives or placed in proper orphanages. Now that the war had ended, "It became too much for my dear wife," he told the Reverend. Her health could not sustain the constant demands of so many young souls. "We did what was best for all concerned." For a year, life in Blackwood Hollow returned to a semblance of normalcy. The Gradys kept to themselves, and gradually the gossip surrounding them faded. The farm continued to operate, though on a reduced scale, with fewer hands employed and less produce brought to market. Then came the autumn of 1869 and the discovery that would forever alter the community's understanding of the quiet family on the hill. It began with the well. In late September, several farms in the area reported problems with their water. An unusual taste, a faint odor that couldn't quite be identified. The local doctor, Horace Fleming, advised boiling all drinking water as a precaution against contamination. The source was eventually traced to a small stream that ran down from the direction of the Grady property. 3 men from town, William Hayes, the store owner, James Collins, the blacksmith, and Peter Lawson, a farmer whose land adjoined the Gradys, decided to follow the stream to its source to identify the contamination. Their path led them directly to the Grady barn. We noticed it before we even reached the structure. James Collins later recounted, a terrible smell like nothing I've encountered before. Sweet and putrid all at once. We thought perhaps an animal had died and been improperly buried. The men approached the barn, intending to speak with Jeremiah about the situation. Finding no one in the vicinity, they entered the structure, calling out as they did so. What they discovered inside would haunt them for the remainder of their lives. The barn, so unusually constructed, was nearly empty. No livestock, no hay, no farming implements, just an open space with that peculiar floor. And in one corner, a section of the floorboards had been pried up, revealing dark, damp soil beneath. But it was the smell that drove the men forward, compelling them to investigate further, despite their growing unease. Peter Lawson, using a shovel that had been left nearby, began to dig into the exposed earth. He hadn't gone more than 2 feet down when he struck something, William Hayes recalled. Something that made a sound no dirt should make. We cleared away more of the soil and found. Dear God, we found a small hand, a child's hand, partially decomposed, but unmistakable. The men fled the barn and rode immediately to fetch Sheriff Thomas Blackwood, a distant relative of the town's founder, and a man known for his level head in crisis. The sheriff, along with Dr. Fleming and several deputies, returned to the Grady property before nightfall. What they uncovered over the next 3 days defies comprehension. Beneath the carefully constructed floor of the barn lay the remains of 42 children buried in layers, some having been there for what appeared to be years, others more recently interred. The bodies were in various states of decomposition, but all appeared to be between the ages of 4 and 12. It was a scene from hell itself, Dr. Fleming wrote in his journal. The manner in which they were arranged suggested a terrible methodical nature to these burials. They were placed in concentric circles, radiating outward from the center of the barn. Most troubling of all, each child had been positioned with their hands crossed over their chest as if laid to rest with care. The sheriff immediately sought to locate the Grady family, but the farmhouse stood empty. Jeremiah, Constance, and their 2 children had vanished. Their personal belongings remained, suggesting a hasty departure. Most chilling of all was what the search party found in Jeremiah's study. A leather-bound ledger containing names, dates, and amounts. It appears to be a record of transactions. Sheriff Blackwood noted in his official report names of children, dates of arrival, and sums of money. The most recent entry was dated just 3 weeks prior, a boy named Samuel, age 6, for the sum of $15. As the investigation expanded, a horrifying picture began to emerge. The Gradys had not been taking in orphans out of charity. They had been purchasing children from orphanages, from desperate parents, from unscrupulous individuals who trafficked in human misery. But why? What purpose did these children serve? And what led to their burial beneath the barn? The answers came from an unexpected source. 2 days after the discovery, as the town reeled from the horror unfolding in their midst, a young woman arrived in Blackwood Hollow. She identified herself as Ruth Collins, formerly Ruth Grady, Jeremiah's daughter. From a previous marriage, long estranged from her father. I received a letter, she told Sheriff Blackwood, a letter from my stepmother, Constance, sent 3 weeks ago. It contained only the words, "Save them if you can," and the name of this town. I came as quickly as possible, but it appears I am too late. Ruth revealed a history few in Blackwood Hollow could have imagined. Jeremiah Grady, she explained, had not made his fortune in shipping or trade. He had been a doctor of sorts, an experimenter interested in the extremes of human physiology, particularly in children, whose bodies he believed held secrets to extending life indefinitely. My father was obsessed with the idea that children possess a vital energy that diminishes with age, Ruth explained. He conducted experiments, terrible, unthinkable experiments, attempting to harness this energy. I fled his home when I was 16. After witnessing what he did to two young siblings he had claimed to adopt. I tried to alert authorities in Boston. But without evidence, who would believe such accusations against a respected man? According to Ruth, Jeremiah had continued his work for years in various locations, always moving when suspicions arose. Blackwood Hollow, with its isolation and trusting community, had provided him the perfect cover to expand his efforts. The barn was his laboratory. She said the children were kept there, not in the house. That's why no one saw them after their initial arrival. The fire at the house was likely set deliberately. A diversion to explain the absence of the children when questions eventually arose. But what of Constance and the Grady children, Abigail and Thomas? Ruth's explanation chilled even the hardened sheriff. Constance was not my father's wife, but his assistant, a woman equally consumed by the pursuit of immortality. Their children, my half-siblings, were not exempt from their experiments. I believe my stepmother finally broke under the weight of their crimes. Her letter to me suggests a fracture in their shared purpose. The search for the Grady family extended beyond Vermont into neighboring states and as far south as Pennsylvania. Descriptions were circulated, rewards offered. But Jeremiah, Grady, Constance, and their children had vanished completely. Some speculated they had fled to Europe or even further afield, where Jeremiah might continue his unspeakable work. Others, noting the careful way the barn had been left partially exposed, wondered if perhaps Constance had enacted her own justice, burying Jeremiah alongside his victims, and then taking her own life and those of her children in some remote location. The truth remains unknown. The bodies of the 42 children were carefully exhumed and given proper burials in the Blackwood Hollow cemetery. A monument was erected, bearing no names, for most remained unidentified, but simply the inscription for the children. May they find in heaven the peace denied them on earth. In the months following the discovery, several residents of Blackwood Hollow reported strange phenomena around the former Grady property. Lights seen moving in the abandoned barn at night. The sounds of children's laughter carried on the wind. A small figure in white, possibly a girl, standing at the edge of the property before vanishing when approached. By the spring of 1870, the town had made a decision. The barn was dismantled. Each piece of wood burned to ash. The farmhouse was similarly destroyed. The land was sown with salt. A symbolic gesture to purify what had been tainted. No crops have grown there since. Blackwood Hollow itself began to decline shortly thereafter. Families moved away, businesses closed. By 1890, the town had been all but abandoned, and by the early 1900s, it had been absorbed into neighboring communities, its name eventually disappearing from maps entirely. But stories persist. Hikers in the Green Mountains occasionally report coming across stone foundations in an overgrown clearing, all that remains of Blackwood Hollow. Those who linger after sunset speak of children's voices calling from the woods, of cold spots that appear suddenly, of the overwhelming sense of being watched, and somewhere perhaps the Gradys still exist in some form. For if Jeremiah's experiments yielded any results, if he discovered even a fraction of what he sought in his quest for immortality, then something of him may yet endure. A presence lurking at the edges of our world, still seeking, still hungry for that vital energy he believed would grant eternal life. The rural roads of Vermont hold many secrets. Towns that no longer exist. Families whose true histories have been obscured by time. And perhaps in the deepest woods, far from any path, there stands another barn with another floor beneath which lie more innocent souls, victims of a quest That has no end. But that, dear viewers, is a story for another time. For those who find themselves traveling through Vermont's backcountry, be wary of old properties with new occupants. Be cautious of reclusive families whose children are rarely seen. And should you happen upon an abandoned barn with a floor that seems newer than the walls around it, do not linger. Do not investigate. Simply walk away and count yourself fortunate to have escaped with nothing worse than a tale to tell. As night falls across the Green Mountains, one might almost hear them. 42 small voices calling from beneath the earth. Not in anger, not in vengeance, but in warning. For the Gradys were never found, and perhaps they never will be. Thank you for joining us on the Ghastly Journal. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, but perhaps not after dark. Some stories are best kept to the daylight hours when the shadows can't quite reach you. Until next time, sleep well. And if you hear children's laughter when no children are present, don't follow the sound. The year is 1878, nearly a decade after the horrific discoveries at the Grady farm. In a small hospital in Montreal, Canada, a nurse attends to an elderly patient recently admitted with severe burns. The man, who gave his name as Joel Johnson, has been slipping in and out of consciousness, muttering in his lucid moments about children and a barn. They call to me, he tells the nurse during one clear-minded spell. Every night for years, they call to me from beneath the floorboards. Their voices, so many voices. The nurse, Ellen Russo, makes a note in the patient's chart. She has dealt with delirium before, especially in the elderly and the dying. But something about this man's ramblings disturbs her more than usual. I couldn't save them, he continues, his bony fingers clutching at her wrist with surprising strength. But I could free them. Fire purifies all sins, does it not, nurse? Later that evening, Ellen discusses the patient with the hospital's chief physician, Dr. Markham. There's something familiar about him, she says. And his burns. They don't appear accidental. The pattern suggests he was in the center of a blaze. Perhaps one he said himself. Dr. Markham frowns, studying the patient's admission papers. Johnson, not an uncommon name. What makes you uneasy, Miss Russo? Ellen hesitates. He mentioned Vermont several times. And a family called Grady. The doctor's expression changes, a shadow crossing his features. I was in Boston when the news broke, he says quietly. A terrible business. They never found the father. As I recall that night, Ellen makes a point of checking on the mysterious patient more frequently than required. Shortly after midnight, she enters his room to find him sitting upright in bed, staring at the corner of the ceiling with an expression of abject terror. They followed me, he whispers, not acknowledging her presence. All the way from Blackwood Hollow, across the border, across the years. Ellen follows his gaze, but sees nothing in the shadows of the room. Mr. Johnson, you need to rest. His eyes snap to her face. Johnson was my mother's name. I took it after. Do you know what it's like, nurse, to discover your father is a monster? To realize the experiments you assisted with as a child were unforgivable sins. A chill runs through Ellen as understanding dawn. You're Thomas Grady. A smile splits the burned face, grotesque in the dim lamplight. I was that boy died in 1869 along with his sister. We helped our mother bury our father beneath his precious barn floor. The 43rd body. The final experiment. Ellen backs toward the door, but curiosity keeps her from fleeing outright. Your mother and sister gone. Their own paths to atonement. Abigail walked into Lake Champlain with stones in her pockets in 73. Mother took poison. The year before. His voice drops to a near whisper. I alone remained. Keeper of the secret until the voices became too persistent. What voices, Mr. Thomas? The children, all 42. They never stopped calling louder and louder as the years passed. Set us free, they said. The floor holds us down. So I returned to that cursed place. I found the new barn they built upon the old foundation. And I brought the fire. Ellen reaches for the doorknob behind her. I should get the doctor. It won't matter. They're here now. Look. Against her better judgment, Ellen looks again to the corner where Thomas stares for just a moment. A trick of shadow and exhaustion. Surely she thinks she sees them. Small figures, indistinct, yet unmistakably children, crowding the space from floor to ceiling. Dozens of them watching silently. She flees the room, returning minutes later with Dr. Markham. They find Thomas Grady dead, his burned body curled in a peaceful posture, a smile frozen on his face. The official cause is listed as heart failure resulting from his injuries. Ellen Russo never speaks of what she saw or thought she saw in that room, but she does place a curious addendum in her personal journal. The children of Blackwood Hollow claim their final victim tonight. May they all find peace at last. This would be the end of the Grady story, a final chapter closing the book on one of New England's most disturbing tales. If not for what happened 3 years later in a small town in upstate New York, Millfield, New York, 1881. The town's newly established medical practice welcomes a promising young doctor and his wife. Dr. Elias Graham and his spouse Charlotte quickly become respected members of the community. The doctor's particular interest in pediatric medicine makes him popular with local families. He has a way with children, one mother remarks to another outside the practice. It's as if he can see right into them, know exactly what ails them without them speaking a word. The Grahams have no children of their own, a fact that draws sympathy from the town's people. Charlotte, a willowy woman with distant eyes, explains that they were not blessed in that regard. Instead, the couple devotes themselves to the welfare of the town's children. Within a year of establishing his practice, Dr. Graham proposes a remarkable charitable venture, a home for orphaned and abandoned children to be built on the extensive property the Grahams have purchased outside town. Every child deserves care and protection, he tells the town council. My wife and I have been fortunate in our circumstances. It is our Christian duty to provide for those less fortunate, particularly the innocent ones who have no say in their fate. The proposal is met with enthusiastic approval. Construction begins on what will be called Graham's Haven in the spring of 1882. The doctor oversees every detail of the building, including notably the basement level, which he insists must be larger and deeper than the architect initially planned for storage and winter provisions. He explains, Vermont winters taught me the value of preparation. The reference to Vermont passes unremarked upon. Few in Millfield know much about the Grahams' past before their arrival, but their generosity and apparent piety make such questions seem unimportant. By autumn of that year, Graham's Haven welcomes its first residents, 6 orphans from as far away as Buffalo and Albany. The 3-story structure with its wide porch and many windows presents an inviting face to the world. Dr. Graham hires a staff of 4 to assist in the children's care, though he and Charlotte maintain private quarters in the east wing of the building. The children require constant supervision. Charlotte tells visitors, "We find it best to be present at all hours." For 2 years, Graham's Haven operates without incident. More children arrive, some orphaned, some abandoned, some with disabilities that their families cannot or will not accommodate. The doctor takes a particular interest in those with unusual conditions or rare diseases, claiming they provide valuable Insights for his medical research. Every malady understood is a step toward prevention. He often says these unfortunate children may be the key to sparing future generations from similar suffering. The first hint that something might be amiss comes in the winter of 1884 when a local teenager, Samuel Whitney, takes a shortcut across the Graham property late one night. Passing near the haven, he claims to hear unusual sounds coming from the basement. Windows, mechanical whirring, liquid bubbling, and most disturbing of all, children's voices raised in what might have been pain or fear. When Samuel mentions this to his father, the man dismisses it. Dr. Graham is a medical man, likely tending to some sick child. Mind your own business and stay off private property after dark. Samuel might have forgotten the incident, except for what he sees the following week. Cutting through the woods that border the Graham property, he spots the doctor and two men he doesn't recognize loading something into a wagon in the pre-dawn hours. Something long and narrow wrapped in canvas, like a small body, Samuel later insists to the sheriff. They handled it carefully like it might break. Sheriff Miller, who sits on the board of Graham's Haven and considers the doctor a personal friend, is skeptical. The Haven receives supplies regularly, medical equipment, provisions, use or a delivery, nothing more. But Samuel remains troubled. He begins watching the Haven more closely, often positioning himself in the woods at night with a clear view of the rear of the property. Over the course of a month, he observes 3 more pre-dawn loadings. Always the same careful handling of canvas-wrapped bundles. Always the same wagon departing in the direction of the old quarry north of town. Finally driven by his growing suspicions, Samuel follows the wagon. Keeping to the woods alongside the road, he tracks it to the abandoned quarry. What he witnesses there will haunt him for the remainder of his short life. The men unwrap the bundle to reveal exactly what Samuel feared. The body of a small child, a girl no more than 7 or 8 years old. But rather than burying her, they place her carefully on what appears to be a stone altar of some kind. Positioned at the quarry's deepest point, Dr. Graham, illuminated by lantern light, produces a small leather case from his coat. From this, he removes several glass vials and a syringe of unusual design. As Samuel watches in horror, the doctor extracts blood from the child's body, filling each vial with methodical precision. But it's what happens next that defies rational explanation. As the final vial is filled, Graham raises it to the night sky, where a full moon hangs heavy and low. He speaks words in a language Samuel doesn't recognize, guttural sounds that seem to alter the very air around the quarry. The moonlight impossibly appears to concentrate on the vial, illuminating the blood within until it glows with an unearthly radiance. Graham drinks the contents in a single swallow. Before Samuel's disbelieving eyes, the doctor's appearance subtly shifts. The grey at his temples recedes. The lines around his eyes soften. His stooped posture straightens. Within moments, he appears years younger. Terrified beyond reason, Samuel flees through the woods. In his haste, he fails to notice the sharp drop hidden by underbrush. The fall breaks his leg in 2 places, leaving him unable to move. His cries for help swallowed by the dense forest. It is Dr. Graham who finds him the following day, leading a search party after Samuel's parents report him missing. "What providence!" the doctor exclaims, kneeling beside the injured young man. "Had we searched in any other direction, we might have missed him entirely." As the other searchers fashion a makeshift stretcher, Graham leans close to Samuel's ear. "You should have stayed away from the quarry," he whispers. "Some knowledge is too dangerous to possess." Samuel Whitney dies 3 days later. Blood poisoning from his compound fracture. Dr. Graham explains to the grieving parents, A tragic accident that no medical intervention could have prevented. The events might have ended there. Another secret added to the growing collection buried in Millfield soil if not for the arrival of Ellen Russo in the spring of 1885. Now in her 30s, Ellen has left nursing to pursue a position as a teacher. Millfield, with its growing population and reputable school, seems an ideal location to begin this new chapter of her life. She secures lodging with a local family and quickly integrates into the community. Within her first month in town, Ellen hears numerous mentions of Dr. Graham and his charitable haven. The parallels to another doctor from her past are too striking to ignore. The interest in children, the secluded property, the basement specially designed for storage. She begins making inquiries. Subtle at first, then increasingly direct. How many children reside at the haven? How frequently do new arrivals come? Are there ever departures, adoptions, reunions with families, children aging out of the system? The answers are troubling in their vagueness. No one seems to know exactly how many children live at the haven at any given time. New faces are occasionally glimpsed, but no formal announcements are made, and departures, none that anyone can recall with certainty. The doctor protects their privacy, she is told repeatedly. Many come from troubled circumstances. Ellen's concerns might have remained speculative if not for a chance encounter at the town's general store. As she selects items from a shelf, she overhears a conversation between Charlotte Graham and the shopkeeper. "We'll need additional supplies this week," Charlotte says. "We're expecting new arrivals tomorrow." Twin boys from Syracuse, 6 years old, both showing signs of the same unusual condition my husband has been studying. The one that affects the blood, the shopkeeper asks. What did he call it? Vital energy depletion, Charlotte replies. A terrible wasting disease. He believes he's close to a breakthrough. However, these boys may provide the missing element. Ellen freezes, a tin of tea clutched in her suddenly trembling hand. The phrase vital energy catapults her back to a Montreal hospital room, to the burned man who claimed to be Thomas Grady, to his description of his father's obsession. That evening, Ellen writes a letter to the authorities in Boston, detailing her suspicions and the connection she has drawn between the Gradys of Vermont and the Grahams of New York. She entrusts the sealed envelope to the stagecoach driver with instructions that it be delivered directly to the police commissioner. The letter never arrives. The stagecoach is robbed en route, the mail pouch among the items stolen. A coincidence, surely. Undeterred, Ellen decides on a more direct approach. She volunteers her nursing skills at Graham's Haven, offering to assist with the children's medical care. One afternoon each week, the doctor, though initially hesitant, eventually agrees, perhaps seeing the advantage in having trained medical assistants on hand. Ellen's first visit to the Haven reveals little out of the ordinary. The main floors are well maintained, the children's quarters clean and adequately furnished. The children themselves appear healthy if subdued, but the basement remains off limits, its entrance secured by a heavy door with an iron lock. My private laboratory, Dr. Graham explains when Ellen inquires. The work I do there is of a sensitive nature. Experimental treatments that might alarm the uninitiated. I'm sure you understand the need for discretion in medical advancement. Over the course of several weeks, Ellen gains the trust of both the Grahams and the Haven staff. She learns the routines of the house, notes when the doctor is absent, observes which staff members possess keys to which doors. Most importantly, she befriends the children, gently encouraging them to share their experiences. Most are reluctant to speak of anything beyond their daily lessons and meals. But one child, a girl of about 9 named Lily, eventually confides in Ellen. Sometimes children go to the special room. She whispers during a quiet moment in the garden, the one beneath the stairs. They don't come back upstairs after. Dr. Graham says they've gone to new homes, but she trails off, eyes darting nervously toward the house. But what, Lily? Ellen prompts gently. But I heard crying once from below the floorboards. In our dormitory. It sounded like Timothy, and he'd gone to the special room the day before. Ellen feels a chill. That has nothing to do with the spring breeze. Have you told anyone else about this? Lily shakes her head vehemently. Sarah did once. She told Mrs. Graham that she heard voices under the floor. The next day, Sarah went to the special room. That night, Ellen makes her decision. She must see what lies behind the basement door, regardless of the risk. Her opportunity comes the following week when Dr. Graham is called away to attend to a patient in a neighboring town. Charlotte, suffering from one of her frequent migraines, retires to her quarters early, leaving the haven in the care of the staff. Ellen, claiming a forgotten shawl, returns to the haven after hours. The back entrance used by delivermen is secured only by a simple latch she had earlier ensured would not fully catch. Slipping inside, she makes her way through the darkened building to the basement door. The lock presents a challenge, but Ellen comes prepared. Among her father's few possessions passed to her upon his death was a set of slender metal tools he had used in his work as a locksmith. These, carried in her medical bag for weeks now, prove adequate to the task. After several tense minutes, the lock yields with a soft click. The stairs beyond the door descend into darkness. Ellen lights the small lantern she has brought, holding it high as she makes her way down. Each step creaking beneath her weight. The air grows cooler, carrying an antiseptic smell that cannot quite mask something beneath. Something reminiscent of the hospital morgue. The basement is far larger than she expected, extending well beyond the footprint of the house above. The central area contains what is unmistakably a laboratory, tables laden with equipment, shelves of books and journals, cabinets filled with bottles and specimens. A desk in one corner holds stacks of papers covered in cramped handwriting. Ellen moves quickly to these documents, scanning their contents by lantern light. What she reads confirms her worst fears. Page after page details extractions and procedures performed on children identified only by initials. Clinical observations of their responses. Measurements of vital energy depletion, notes on the transference process. 1. Journal bound in red leather contains entries that span decades, far longer than the haven has existed. The earliest dates coincide with the Grady family's time in Vermont. The handwriting is identical throughout. My work continues, reads an entry from 1877. C and A have succumbed to weakness of will, but I persist. The setback in V was significant but temporary. New methods of extraction prove more efficient with minimal wastage. The essence, once properly preserved, maintains its potency for approximately 1 lunar cycle. Ellen forces herself to set aside the journal, aware that time is limited. The laboratory, disturbing as it is not what she came to find. Lily spoke of voices beneath the floorboards of children who disappeared into the special room. Beyond the laboratory area, a narrow corridor leads deeper into the basement. Ellen follows it. The flame of her lantern casting long shadows on the stone walls. The corridor ends at another door. This one secured with a different type of lock. Newer, more complex. Her tools prove inadequate against this barrier, but the door itself is oldwood weakened by the basement's dampness. Ellen finds a heavy metal rod among the laboratory equipment and wrapping it in cloth to muffle the sound, strikes at the area around the lock. After several attempts, the wood splinters enough for her to force the door open. What lies beyond defies her worst expectations. The room is circular. Its walls are fitted stone like a well. In the center stands a stone table. Its surface stained dark in a pattern that suggests years of use. Around the perimeter, set into the walls at regular intervals, are smaller loves, each just large enough to hold a child. Each secured with an iron grate. Most are empty. 3 contain occupants. Small figures huddled in darkness, stirring slightly at the intrusion of light. Ellen rushes to the nearest, finding a boy of perhaps 7 years, his skin pale to the point of translucence, his eyes unfocused. "Can you hear me?" She whispers, testing the grate. It's locked, but the mechanism is simple. "I'm going to help you, all of you." The child doesn't respond. Doesn't even seem to register her presence. Ellen moves to the next alcove, finding a similar situation. A girl slightly older in the same state of near catatonia. The third holds another boy. This one conscious enough to shrink away from the light. "Don't," he croaks, his voice barely audible. "He'll know. He always knows." "Who will know?" Ellen asks, though she already suspects the answer. "Father," the boy whispers. "Father who gives and takes. Father below and Father above." A chill runs through Ellen as she recognizes the phrasing from the journal entries. Some kind of mantra or indoctrination repeated to these captive children. She works quickly at the lock on the boy's alcove, the most lucid of the 3. "I'm going to get you out," she tells him. "All of you. But I need to know, are there others?" The voices beneath the floorboards. The boy points downward with a trembling finger. Ellen directs her lantern light to the floor of the circular room. Unlike the stone walls, it consists of wooden planks. New wood recently installed. And between the planks, visible now in the lantern's glow, are narrow gaps through which something can be seen moving. Fingers, tiny fingers pushing up through the spaces between the boards. With growing horror, Ellen locates a metal ring set into the floor, a trapdoor. She pulls it open to reveal a space beneath, a pit dug into the earth. Its depth impossible to gauge in the limited light, but the contents are clear enough. Children, dozens of them, packed into the earthen pit like cargo in a ship's hold. Some appear barely alive, others clearly dead, their bodies providing the foundation upon which the living stand. The stench that rises from the opening nearly overwhelms Ellen. She staggers back, fighting the urge to retch. The boy in the alcove watches her with dull eyes. "He puts us there when we used up," he says flatly. "When there's nothing left to take, but we don't die." "Not really." "He won't let us." Ellen manages to free the boy from his alcove, though he can barely stand. She's working on the second child's enclosure. When she hears it, footsteps on the basement stairs. Heavy deliberate steps that can only belong to one person. "Miss Russo." Dr. Graham's voice calls from the laboratory area. "I believe you've strayed somewhere you shouldn't be." Ellen pushes the boy toward the corridor. "Run," she urges. "Get out of the house. Find help." But the child remains frozen, terror rendering him immobile. Ellen turns to face the approaching doctor, positioning herself between him and the children. Elias Graham appears in the doorway, his face betraying no surprise at finding her there. "I wondered how long it would take you," he says conversationally. "From the moment you arrived in Millfield asking your questions about the haven, about the children, you reminded me of someone, a nurse in Montreal, wasn't it? The night Thomas died." Ellen stiffens. "You were there." A thin smile crosses Graham's Face. I'm everywhere, Miss Russo. I've lived many lives, worn many names. Grady was just one of them. You're insane, Ellen says, her voice steadier than she feels. Whatever you believe you're accomplishing here, it's madness. These children are serving a greater purpose than you can comprehend, Graham interrupts. Their sacrifice enables work that will ultimately benefit all humanity. The extension of life, the defeat of death itself, by stealing the life from children. Ellen's disgust is palpable. By burying them alive beneath your feet. Graham sighs as if disappointed by her limited understanding. The process requires proximity. The vital energy must be continuously harvested. It dissipates quickly once the host expires completely. He takes a step toward her and Ellen retreats, keeping the stone table between them. You won't leave this room, Miss Russo, but I can offer you a choice in how you remain as my assistant. Perhaps. Charlotte grows weaker each year despite the treatments. I find myself in need of a woman with medical training, someone who understands the importance of the work. You're offering me a position as your accomplice in murdering children, Ellen says flatly. I decline, Graham's expression hardens. Then you'll join them below. A waste of your potential, but I cannot allow you to interfere. He lunges suddenly, faster than a man of his apparent age should move. Ellen barely evades his grasp, knocking over her lantern in the process. The flame catches on something. Papers, chemicals. It's impossible to tell in the chaos that follows. Fire spreads with alarming speed, engulfing the laboratory beyond the circular room. Graham howls in rage, momentarily distracted by the destruction of his work. Ellen seizes the opportunity, grabbing the boy from the alcove and pushing past the doctor into the burning laboratory. The fire has already reached the stairs, but it's their only route of escape. This way, Ellen shouts to the child, pulling him toward the flames. Cover your face with your sleeve and stay low. They make it halfway up the stairs before Graham catches them. His strength is inhuman as he drags Ellen backward, his fingers digging into her ankle with crushing force. The boy continues upward, disappearing into the smoke-filled hallway above. You destroyed everything, Graham snarls. His face transformed by rage into something barely recognizable as human. Decades of work, irreplaceable records. Ellen kicks free of his grasp, but there's nowhere to go except back into the inferno below. The heat is unbearable. The smoke thickening with each passing second. It ends here, she tells him, a strange calm settling over her despite the circumstances. Whatever you are, whatever you've done, it stops now. Graham laughs, a sound devoid of mirth. You think fire can destroy me? I've survived worse. I'll begin again as I always do. There are always more children, Miss Russo. Always more life to harvest. The roof above the stairs gives way then, a cascade of burning timber separating Ellen from her captor. Through the flames, she sees Graham turn back toward the circular room, toward the children still trapped in there. Loves, toward the pit beneath the floor. Ellen's choice is made in an instant. Instead of fleeing upward, she plunges through the burning debris after Graham. The pain is excruciating as flames catch her clothing, her hair, but she doesn't falter. She reaches the circular room just as Graham is closing the trap door, sealing the pit beneath. They stay with me, he hisses, seeing her approach. My collection, my sustenance. With the last of her strength, Ellen throws herself at him. They fall together. Graham's head striking the edge of the stone table with a sickening crack. Ellen, her consciousness fading as the fire consumes her, manages one final act. She drags herself to the trap door and pulls it open, giving the trapped children below at least a chance at escape. As darkness claims her, Ellen Russo thinks she sees them rising from the pit, not climbing, but floating upward, their small forms passing through the flames untouched, their faces peaceful for the first time. Whether vision or hallucination brought on by the smoke, she cannot say, but she goes to her death believing that in some way she has set them free. Graham's Haven burns to its foundations that night. The official record states that 17 children perished in the blaze along with Dr. and Mrs. Graham and a visiting teacher, Ellen Russo. The 3 children who escaped, a boy from the basement, and twin girls who were sleeping near an exit, tell tales so fantastical that adults attribute them to the trauma of the experience. Tales of a pit beneath the house filled with living and dead children, of Dr. Graham drinking blood by moonlight, of Miss Russo engulfed in flames, opening the way for spirits to ascend. The site of Graham's Haven is eventually cleared and left vacant. No new construction attempted despite the prime location. Local superstition holds that the ground is tainted, that those who linger there after dark can hear children's voices carried on the wind. The boy who escaped the basement, who never reveals his name and is eventually adopted by a family in Albany, grows to adulthood, carrying the secret of what truly happened beneath Graham's Haven. On his deathbed in 1942, at the age of 65, he confesses to his daughter. There were hundreds of them, he whispers, his voice faint but insistent, going back years, decades. He kept them in that pit, feeding on what he called their vital energy. Some were just bones, but they moved. They all moved. When his daughter asks who he was, the old man's eyes fill with the terror that belongs to the child he once was. He had many names, many faces. The children called him Father Below. But his true name was written in the Red Book, a name older than any language I know. What was in the book? His daughter asks, humoring what she assumes are the delusions of a dying man. The secret. How he lived so long. How he changed his face, his body. The ritual he performed with the children's blood. The old man grips his daughter's hand with surprising strength. He wrote it all down, and the book survived the fire. The daughter dismisses the story as the ramblings of an old man near death. But after his funeral, going through his few possessions, she finds a small key taped to the underside of a drawer in his desk. The key fits a safe deposit box at a bank in Millfield, a box rented continuously since 1885. The payments made through an account that transfers funds automatically each year. Inside the box is a single item, a leather-bound journal. Its cover a deep red that might be due to age or might be its original color. The first page bears a name written in a cramped, precise hand. Jeremiah Grady. The daughter begins to read, not understanding what she has found, but unable to set it aside. By the 3rd page, her hands are trembling. By the 10th, she knows she cannot keep reading and yet cannot stop. The journal contains detailed records of experiments conducted on children over a span of nearly 40 years, clinical descriptions of procedures too horrific to comprehend, methodical notes on the extraction and consumption of what the writer terms vital essence. And most disturbing of all, instructions for a ritual that, if the journal is to be believed, grants extended life, regenerative abilities, and the power to transfer one's consciousness into a new body. The final entry is dated April 12, 1885, the night of the fire at Graham's Haven. It consists of a single line. Should catastrophe befall this iteration, seek the child who bears the mark. The work continues through the bloodline. The daughter closes the journal, her mind reeling. What has she read? The records of a madman? The delusions of a monster who murdered children? Or something more? Something that suggests her father's fears were justified? That the being he called Father Below might indeed have survived the fire. She decides to destroy the journal to end whatever legacy it represents. That night, she burns it in her fireplace, watching as the pages curl and blacken as decades of unspeakable history turn to ash. But as the last page burns, she feels a sudden chill, as if a cold wind has passed through the room. And for just a moment, a trick of the flame. Surely, she thinks. She sees faces in the fire. Small faces, dozens of them, watching her with solemn eyes. The daughter dies 3 days later. Heart failure, the doctor says. No sign of foul play, no indication of illness, just a sudden cessation of life, as if something vital had been extracted from her body. Her 17-year-old son, who inherits her house and possessions, finds among her papers a half-written letter addressed to him. The contents make little sense. Warnings about a journal she destroyed, about a man who cannot die, about a mark he should look for on his own body. The boy dismisses it as evidence of the stroke the doctor suggested might have preceded his mother's death. He continues with his life, graduates high school, attends college, starts a family of his own. But sometimes in dreams, he sees children buried beneath wooden floors. He feels an inexplicable hunger that food cannot satisfy. And on his left shoulder blade, a birthmark in the shape of a small handprint grows more distinct with each passing year. In a small town in Vermont, the ruins of Blackwood Hollow lie forgotten in the forest. In upstate New York, the site of Graham's Haven remains undeveloped, a blank space on local maps. And somewhere perhaps a man who has worn many names and lived many lives continues his work. Always seeking, always hungry, always watching for the children who might fuel his endless quest for immortality. For in the shadows of America's history, in the spaces between recorded events, in the silence of unmarked graves, there exist horrors beyond comprehension. Tales like that of the Grady family and the 42 children buried beneath their barn floorboards remind us that sometimes the monsters in our midst wear human faces. And sometimes they never truly die. Sleep well, dear viewers, and check beneath your floors.